Hi everyone. I have a case today from the year 2000, and it's an account that I've only seen covered once or twice on true crime channels, so I'd like to give this wonderful woman more exposure and more of the honor that I feel that she deserves. Geraldine Davidson was a beloved 84-year-old retired history and music teacher at the local high school. A widow of 15 years, she lived in the same house for many years. Even at her elderly age, she was a church organist. She lived in Palestine, Texas, which is between Houston and Dallas. Now, on January 26, 2000, the Palestine police were called to do a welfare check on Mrs. Davidson because she was a church organist, like I said, and she missed the choir practice, which was highly unusual for her. She was always really punctual and always there. Her children had also been concerned about her recently because of her being elderly and living alone, but she stated, "I've lived here so many years and I refuse to leave." But anyway, they told her, Geraldine told the children that recently she had discovered a broken window in her home, and shortly after that, two strange young men knocked on her door and saying, "Please, we really need to use the phone. Can we come in?" And Geraldine was a very trusting woman. She goes, "I guess, come on in." So she just was doing some chores or something, and then she was listening and heard that they were not making any phone calls at all. So she came out, and it looked like they were trying to steal stuff. So instead, she just chased them out, and they fled. But anyway, the police came, and then they looked around the house. It looked empty from the outside, but they assumed, well, maybe Geraldine's out, and then she'll return shortly. But then what happened next, the police were driving around, and it looked like what they found was her car, and so they stopped the car, which was moving, and it had 5 other people in it. They are taken in for questioning, and the vehicle is impounded for processing. Some more police returned to the home, and they noticed that the kitchen window is broken, and the house appears to be ransacked, and looks like maybe jewelry is stolen or something like that, maybe some more valuables. The officers called the district attorney to the scene, and back at the station, the 5 people who were in Geraldine's car claimed that they had rented the car from someone else in exchange for some drugs, which I guess happens all the time, and I wasn't aware of that, but I guess that's something that happens where people actually get a rental car and then exchange it to someone else for drugs. The person whom they stated that they rented the vehicle from is named Danielle Simpson, who was a known violent offender. They tracked him down at the address that they listed, but he saw them, and he jumped out a window and fled. So for the time being, he was on the run. But Danielle's wife, Jennifer Simpson, was there, and they brought her into the police station for questioning. Now, Danielle Simpson, Jennifer, she shocks the investigators with an incredibly cruel tale. But at first, I'm going to give some background information on their relationship. Jennifer Simpson was a 16-year-old wife of now fugitive Daniel, and she said that they met in high school, and that their folks thought that he was bad news right from the start. One day, the 2 of them took off for a couple of weeks. They went to a motel and were tracked down by police. Daniel was sent to jail for sexual assault with a minor, because Jennifer was I believe 15 at the time then. However, he told her that if she married him, that the charges would be dropped. So the 2 got married, and they actually had a baby together. But shortly after they got married, his true colors came out, and he was extremely violent and abusive to her. She was terrified of him, and supposedly Daniel's father was even afraid of him. According to Jennifer, on the morning Geraldine disappeared, she overheard Danielle and a 13-year-old friend named Pete McCoy plotting to break into her home. She admitted to the Palestine police how she became an accomplice to this horrific crime. Danielle, Jennifer, and McCoy went to Geraldine's house where they noticed that she wasn't home. Jennifer climbs through the window that the 2 had previously broken and let them in. They began ransacking the home when they panicked because unexpectedly Geraldine returns. So they tried hiding in the house, but that didn't work because Geraldine notices that the house has been ransacked, like I said, and then Danielle comes out, grabs her, tells her, if you scream at all, I'm going to kill you. He also tells Jennifer to hold her while they grab some tape to put on her mouth, so to keep her from screaming. Then they grab a pillowcase, put it over her head. Jerry pleads and mumbles with them to let her go, but they grab her, all three of them, and they put her in the trunk of her own car. So then the three of them go for a ride and buy some marijuana, which was laced with formaldehyde, so it's kind of a weird intoxication, I believe. They stop at Danielle's aunt's house, asking her where they might get some money for Geraldine's car. And then Danielle said, well, I want to show you something here. So, they thought that she was like a trophy, so they open the trunk, and Danielle tells the aunt that he has kidnapped this woman and put her in the trunk. Shows her to another friend that happens to come by too, and both of them just kind of stare there, and all they do is look at her. And Geraldine at this point has gotten the tape off her mouth, and she says, please let me go. I will give you the car. I'll just give you the car. Just let me go. I need my medicine, and I need to eat something. But Pete McCoy, the 13-year-old, and also Jennifer are in the car, and they don't speak up at what's going on or anything. The next stop that Daniel, I spelled Danielle like Danielle, but it's pronounced Daniel, so I kind of go back and forth with pronunciation. But anyway, Danielle, Jennifer, and Pete McCoy drive to Danielle's 15-year-old brother, Lionel. They also show him Geraldine, and he does nothing about it as well, just kind of laughs and stuff. So now the four of them are driving around this Texas city, Palestine, and they're writing to many friends, showing off Mrs. Thompson. Nobody reports anything to authorities. They all kind of look at it as a joke about her suffering. And at one point, Lionel hits her with a fist, and probably, I heard, maybe even a shovel. After the car was processed by detectives, this is kind of a side note, they had found 10 sets of fingerprints on the trunk of her car, which revealed that 10 people viewed Geraldine in the trunk and callously did nothing. Now, the next step on their trip for the four of them was to find a fast food place, and that was caught on surveillance, and Jennifer goes inside, waits in line to spend the money that they've stolen for Geraldine, for the food purchase. And one thing, a note I wanted to mention is that at any time in there while she was waiting, there were other people in line, she could have flagged somebody down and said, please, whispered it, call 911. I need to put this situation to a stop right now. It's getting out of hand. She didn't do anything, She didn't ask somebody to call on their cell phone, the clerks there or anything. So she was waiting for the food. They come out to the parking lot. Jerry is desperately now, she must have gotten the duct tape loose on her hands too. Desperately pounding up the truck. She's screaming to be let go. And the four of them decided it's time for another plan. Lionel laughs and suggests a brutal plan that's about to unfold. They go to a store to purchase some duct tape. Jennifer, now as in the interview room, tells detectives how they drive to a dead-end street where all three of the men get out, and they punch her and they toss her around. They put duct tape on her mouth and then around her hands and around her whole body, I believe. They put her back in the trunk, and then they go searching for a concrete block. And, Geraldine can hear all this, too, while she's in the trunk, and I can't even imagine the horror and anticipation of what might be her final moments and the absolute desperate prayers that she's saying to her God now. She was a religious woman and everything. Anyway, they all drive off to the banks of the Neches River, and it's nighttime by now. Here's where I'm going to give a bit of a trigger warning, because the following details are graphic. So, anyway, Danielle states that Danielle was in the car, and the 13-year-old McCoy, where she saw Lionel and Danielle first. They had found the block, that they had tied the block, tied a rope around the block, and that they also tied the other end around the waist of Geraldine. They threw the block into the river, and then it was soon followed quickly by Geraldine. So Mrs. Geraldine Thompson, church organist, former adored school teacher, mother, grandmother, was thrown callously into the river, followed by starting with that block. And she was still alive when she was thrown into the river. So the four of them are going home now, not saying much of anything. And they took Pete McCoy, the 13-year-old, and Jennifer home, where she falls asleep, but not mentions anything to anybody. Easily goes off to sleep. I can't imagine how you would just fall asleep after something like that. But anyway, right after that, Danielle opens the bedroom window, and he climbs through the window, and he says, I gotta hide. I don't feel safe. I think the police might be after me. And right after that, you hear the sirens coming to the home, and that's the point at the story where Danielle had gotten out of the window and fled and was going on the run. Now, meanwhile, now it's the next morning, so it's January 27th. A passing motorist noticed what she thought was a body floating in the Natchez River. So law enforcement is quick to rush to the scene, wondering if this is the missing woman, Geraldine Thompson, who everyone's been looking for. They're also thinking, well, maybe she's still alive and we can save her. When Texas Ranger Rudy Flores arrives, he notices that this is a recent crime due to the fresh tire marks. There was a red black blanket wrapped around this bundle, and he opens it up and discovers that it is Geraldine. The reason he can recognize her so readily is because Mrs. Thompson, I keep saying Thompson, Davidson was his 5th grade teacher, So this really hit him hard. This was the worst case he said that he'd ever been on. They immediately sent her body to the medical examiner in Dallas, where Jennifer's account of what happened to Jerry is confirmed by the autopsy. So, some of the autopsy report, she had contusions and injuries to her face, her breasts, her back, legs, and the cause of her death was ruled as slow drowning. So Mrs. Davidson indeed was alive and knew that she would die in an unspeakable manner. Her family, children, grandchildren, as well as the entire Palestine community are horrified and traumatized by Jerry's murder. Everyone is afraid that the other 3 culprits, Daniel, Lionel, and Pete McCoy, won't be apprehended and brought to justice. But they do soon get a lead. The officers find Daniel and Lionel Simpson at a known drug house and bring them in for questioning. They do also locate Pete McCoy at his house and bring him to a juvenile center. Now, Daniel does refuse to cooperate and ask for a lawyer, so he's thrown in a cell, but Lionel does agree to give a written statement. He said that 2 weeks before the murder, Danielle hatches his plan with him to steal what they could from the elderly woman, including her vehicle. Even though he did admit to hitting her with a cinder block, he denied being the one who threw her into the river. Investigators were able to prove, however, that the only 2 people who actually opened the trunk, because of the fingerprints on the inside, were Danielle and Lionel. So they did know that these 2 were the ones who threw Geraldine into the river. And at this point now, since all of them were involved and others are everyone's pointing the finger at everybody else, the ones who are speaking at least, they do have enough evidence to charge all 4 of them with capital murder. There was a forensic psychiatrist named David Self, and he was asked by the state to evaluate Daniel Simpson, and not surprisingly, he diagnosed him as a psychopath, showing no empathy for remorse or understanding or for the feelings of others. In February 2000, a month after the crime, the Anderson County Grand Jury indicts Daniel, Lionel, Jennifer Simpson, and Pete McCoy on capital murder charges, and prosecutors do seek the death penalty. but Jennifer decides to turn against her husband. However, the judge makes a ruling that none of the confessions can be used in court, but the state does plan to present their case without the confessions. Now, Pete McCoy strikes his plea deal in exchange for his testimony against the others and receives a lenient 13-year sentence. Jennifer and Lionel will be tried as adults, but the death penalty, unfortunately, is off the table because at the time of the crime they were minors. Since the community is understandably outraged by Geraldine Davidson's slang, they moved the trial to a different county. Jennifer Simpson makes a plea deal, life with the possibility of parole after 30 years, which that should have been death, even if they're young. That's my belief. With the stipulation that they testify against Lionel and Daniel, that she testifies against them, or he does. Lionel Simpson receives a life sentence with the possibility after 40 years. So let me just review that again. I got it kind of mixed up. So Jennifer does a plea deal where she testifies against the others. She gets a life sentence with a possibility of parole after 30 years. Lionel Simpson also does a plea deal, receives a life sentence with possibility of parole after 40 years. And the last to be tried was Daniel Simpson. Psychiatrist for the prosecution, David Self, stated that Daniel had a dangerous personality disorder and was likely to reoffend again. After a 5-week trial, he was convicted and sentenced to death. This case has just really, really blown me away. I can't remember when I heard about this or saw something on this, but it was one of those that just stuck with me. And every time I think about this woman, I get the shivers. It kind of reminds me of the little boy in England. I don't remember, around Liverpool, James Bulger, his horrific death, 3-year-old. It's kind of like that, kind of a deep wound to my soul like that. I know I try not to take a lot of these cases personally, but I really can't help it. You know, it's just horrific. But I'm going to give a post-conviction status here. Now, in October 2005, Lionel Simpson actually made an unsuccessful attempt to appeal his conviction. The conviction was held, life with possibility of parole after 30 years, and he remains incarcerated today. Pete McCoy, the 13-year-old, was released early in May of 2007 after serving only 6 years of his 13-year sentence. So, let's see, he was 13, so 14 at the time of the trial, so he was 20 or something when he got out. I mean, this is unbelievable. You know, they're still kids when he got out. I wasn't able to locate any other news on Jennifer Simpson. I assume that she's still serving her life sentence. I don't know anything about parole or when she's up for that. I would believe that would be 2041 or something like that. And finally, mid-November of 2009, 9 years after the brutal torture of Mrs. Geraldine Davidson, Danielle Simpson was executed by lethal injection. I was kind of going in my head how long this whole ordeal took, from the time that they abducted Geraldine to the time that she was in the river. I would think probably a few hours or so of them just driving back and forth to all these friends and stuff and people and getting food and stuff, having to open the trunk for her and, telling her to shut up or whatever. I'm just saying that in what tone that they would use. Then having to go to a store to purchase the duct tape, having to drive around to look for the rope and all that, and finally get to her final, hate to say her final destination, but that's what it was. And then, having to put the rope around the concrete and then around her and then throw her in. And then when they said slow drowning, that was like horrific to me. I mean, I'm hoping that her spirit had left her body or something like that, and she wasn't quite conscious after that. That's my hope. But anyway, she died cold and alone, and slow. So that could have been, I don't know, I heard about 10 minutes to drown or something. So anyway, I would think maybe maybe 8 hours total. I don't know. Anyway, what I want to say is that after the lethal injection, what was going on is it only took him 9 minutes to die. So his life took 9 minutes to die, where hers took hours. And beforehand, he made no apology or confession for his crime whatsoever. So, the whole case is just absolutely horrifying. So anyway, I do want to thank you for listening to this case. Like I said, this is something that I haven't heard that much at all. So I just wanted to, she's been on my mind a lot, and I'd like to just give her some respect. So thanks you very much.